Have you ever wondered what stories ancient Egyptian artifacts could tell? Welcome to Unearthed Secrets, where history's silent witnesses come alive. From statues that waited millennia to coffins that whispered across time, we explore their mysteries. Please subscribe, like this video, and tell us where and what time you're watching from. The Seated Scribe, the statue that waited 4,000 years. Beneath the golden sun of ancient Egypt, where the desert meets the murmuring edge of eternity, a man once sat with a reed in hand, poised between thought and word. His gaze, calm yet piercing, seemed to see beyond time itself. Today we call him the Seated Scribe, but once, long ago, he had a name that may have echoed through the halls of temples and the dusty air of scribal schools, a man of ink and silence, recording the pulse of an empire. When archaeologists uncovered him in Saqqara, they found not just a statue, but a presence. His eyes, crafted from copper, rock crystal, and polished magnesite, shimmered with such lifelike intensity that many who saw him for the first time felt unsettled. His gaze seemed alive, awake. It was as though this man, seated cross-legged in eternal concentration, had been waiting for millennia, not to be worshipped, but to be remembered. The Seated Scribe dates back to Egypt's 5th dynasty, around 2400 BCE, a time when pyramids still cast fresh shadows across the sand, and scribes were the keepers of divine knowledge. Writing was sacred. To write was to control meaning itself. To hold a reed pen was to command eternity. And this statue, perfectly poised with papyrus unrolled across his lap, captured that sacred act better than any monument could. His body is not that of a god or king. He is soft-bellied, mortal, human. The sculptor who shaped him carved every fold of flesh, every subtle imperfection, not to mock him, but to honor him, because Egypt understood that knowledge itself was divine. While pharaohs ruled with scepters and crowns, scribes ruled with ink and memory. The limestone form still carries traces of paint. His lips once glowed red, his eyebrows black, his skin a warm ochre, the tones of a living man under the Egyptian sun. It's easy to imagine him seated in a shaded courtyard, the rush of Nile air carrying the scent of ink, papyrus, and lotus. Perhaps he listened as temple priests dictated hymns to Ra. Perhaps he tallied the harvest of grain, ensuring every sheaf that passed through the royal storehouses was recorded. The artistry of his creation speaks volumes. Those crystalline eyes, set deep within the carved sockets, are the work of genius. They are inlaid with clear quartz, backed by copper to catch and reflect light. When sunlight or torchlight met them, they glowed, alive, aware. To the ancient Egyptians, the eyes were the seat of the soul. They believed that statues were not inert stone. They could house the ka, the life force of a person. This scribe was not a symbol, he was a vessel. It's possible this statue once stood in a tomb, placed carefully near the body of the scribe it represented. Its purpose was clear, to allow the scribe to continue his duty in the afterlife. Even in death, the scribe's task did not end. He would write for eternity, recording the divine order, the deeds of the gods, and the endless turning of the stars. But this statue is more than ritual. There's something deeply human in his expression. The slight tightening of his lips, the faint lift of his brow. It's the look of a man caught mid-thought, perhaps slightly amused by the world he's recording. 4,000 years later, his gaze still meets ours, as if to say, I was here, I watched, I understood. In the flicker of his carved eyes lies the memory of Egypt's written word, hieroglyphs, the sacred carvings. The scribe was the bridge between the divine and the earthly, between the spoken breath of priests and the eternal permanence of stone. Without the scribes, Egypt's history would have faded into dust. They captured the world in lines and symbols, the rise of kings, the flooding of the Nile, the laws of the gods. Imagine him at work, in the hush of an early morning, when the city of Memphis stirred awake. He sits cross-legged on a woven mat, inkpots at his side. The papyrus stretches before him, a smooth expanse of promise. Each stroke of his pen is deliberate, as though he is aware of the weight of time behind every word. In the background, temple bells chime. Priests chant hymns to Ra, and the distant cry of traders fills the air. But the scribe remains still, a quiet observer in a world of noise. In this silence lies the mystery of his statue. Why was he immortalized? Most statues in ancient Egypt celebrated kings, gods, or priests, yet this is an ordinary man, a record keeper, a thinker. Perhaps that's what makes him extraordinary, because in the eyes of Egypt, knowledge was power. The gods could not speak without words, and words could not exist without scribes. Archaeologists have debated his identity. Some believe he was an official named Kai, others suggest he may represent all scribes, a collective tribute to their sacred role. But perhaps his true identity doesn't matter. He is the embodiment of the Egyptian mind, patient, observant, enduring. The limestone, though aged and cracked, still glows with the warmth of craft and care. Every contour speaks of a sculptor who understood not just anatomy but spirit. The hands rest lightly on the papyrus, ready yet relaxed. The posture is perfect balance, calm concentration without stiffness. The gaze is unbroken. The seated scribe does not look at you, he looks through you, across time. He has seen dynasties rise and fall. He has seen the sands shift over cities and monuments. He has watched as languages changed, empires faded, and his own craft, the art of the reed pen, was replaced by others. Yet here he remains, unblinking, patient as ever. There's a quiet poetry in his endurance. Every visitor who stands before him in the Louvre feels the same sensation, that subtle unease of being watched by the past. His eyes seem to hold questions that cannot be answered. Did he know, when he sat for this likeness, that his image would outlive even the pyramids that surrounded him? Did he imagine that thousands of years later, strangers from distant lands would stand before him, searching his face for meaning? Perhaps deep down, he did. Perhaps he understood that the act of writing, of recording thought, is the only true defiance of time. That every word written, every story captured, carries the writer forward into eternity. And so the seated scribe sits still, forever waiting, his gaze unwavering. His silence is not emptiness, it is a kind of wisdom, a reminder that in stillness there is understanding. The statue has outlived his kingdom, his gods, and even his language. Yet in that eternal stillness, he continues to watch, as he has always done, with the patient eyes of someone who once knew the weight of words. Perhaps that's his message to us now, that civilizations rise and fall, languages shift, and stories fade, but the written word endures. The scribe, through ink and stone, remains eternal. For in Egypt, even silence was written, and this statue, the man who waited 4,000 years, still holds the pen. The voice that spoke after 3,000 years. The Coffin of Nesyamun. Have you ever imagined a voice echoing across 3 millennia, breaking the silence of death itself? A sound so faint, so impossibly old, that it seemed more memory than noise. Tonight, we drift into that silence, to Thebes, to the resting place of a man whose whisper was carried beyond time. This is the story of Nesyamun, the priest who found a way to speak again. The desert air over ancient Thebes is dry enough to preserve eternity. It holds the scent of dust and incense, of faded hieroglyphs etched into stone and forgotten prayers sealed into sarcophagi. Somewhere beyond the Valley of the Kings, past the resting places of pharaohs, there lies a smaller tomb, humble by comparison, but rich with the care of a people who believed words themselves could live forever. Nesyamun had been a priest of Amun during the reign of Ramesses XI, more than 3,000 years ago. He lived in a city where language was sacred, where to speak was to create, where sound shaped the divine. And for Nesyamun, whose very life was spent chanting before the god Amun, speech was not merely human, it was holy. He would have stood in the great temple at Karnak, under the rising sun, the columns towering above him like forest trunks of limestone. Each morning he would begin the sacred rituals, purifications, offerings, invocations, and lift his voice in prayer. The air would have shimmered with incense, and his words would echo softly, rolling through the halls like waves against stone. To be a priest of Amun was not only to serve but to maintain harmony between heaven and earth. Each syllable had weight, every chant an ancient rhythm connecting gods and men. So when Nesyamun grew old, his life's work was not his possessions, but his voice. He had served the god with words, and he wanted those words, his breath, his sound, to endure beyond death. When he died, his body was prepared with care that only love for eternity could inspire. The embalmers washed his body, packed it with resin and linen, and wrapped him in endless layers of white. His face was covered with a gilded mask, his hands folded upon his chest. Over him the priests chanted the prayers of the Book of the Dead, those sacred formulas meant to guide his soul to the afterlife. And among them was one wish that now seems almost prophetic, to speak the words of the gods in the presence of the divine. For centuries, Nesyamun lay undisturbed, sealed in darkness. Dynasties rose and fell. Sand buried temples. The language he had spoken changed, forgotten and reborn through millennia. Thebes became ruins. Ruins became dust. And yet his name, carefully written in hieroglyphs, survived on the lid of his coffin. Nesyamun, the true of voice. When his tomb was finally opened in the early 19th century, explorers and Egyptologists peered upon a man who had not been seen for 30 centuries. His skin had turned the color of ancient parchment. His teeth were still visible in a faint smile, as if he had been waiting patiently for someone to listen. The British archaeologists who transported him to Leeds City Museum could never have imagined that, 200 years later, technology would give Nesyamun a strange kind of afterlife, not through spirit or reincarnation, but through sound. In 1823, when Nesyamun arrived in England, the world was just beginning to understand ancient Egypt. Hieroglyphs had only recently been deciphered. To the Victorians, he was both curiosity and wonder, a direct connection to a civilization that had lived closer to the dawn of humanity than to their own time. But over the next 2 centuries, the fascination deepened. Scientists studied his remains again and again, learning more with each passing decade. In the 20th century, radiography revealed the secrets of his embalming, the resins, the precise cuts, the arrangement of wrappings that preserved his form so perfectly. His teeth showed signs of wear from coarse bread, his bones told of age and arthritis. He had lived, they concluded, well into his 50s, old by the standards of his time. And through it all, one thing remained clear. Nesyamun had been a man of words. But the most extraordinary revelation came in the 21st century. A team of researchers from the University of York and Leeds teaching hospitals began a project unlike any before. They wanted to recreate Nesyamun's voice, not metaphorically, but physically. Using advanced CT scanning, they examined his throat, mouth, and vocal tract, all astonishingly intact. They measured every curve, every hollow, every dimension that once shaped the air as it passed through his body. Then, with the help of 3D printing, they built a precise replica of his vocal passage. When connected to an artificial larynx, a modern device that simulates the vibration of vocal cords, it produced a sound, a single vowel, a small, soft, almost human ah. It was the first time in 3,000 years that Nesyamun's voice had been heard. It lasted only a moment, a fraction of a breath, yet it carried an immense stillness. Those present said it felt like time itself had paused. There, in a lab filled with whirring machines and flickering screens, a priest of ancient Thebes had spoken again. But that single syllable meant far more than curiosity or science. It touched something deeper, something timeless. It reminded us that sound, like memory, never truly dies. That in every whisper of wind through temple ruins, in every chant preserved on stone, there is an echo of someone who once spoke to the sky. Imagine for a moment the city of Thebes in his day. The river Nile glides through the land like a silver ribbon, reflecting the orange glow of sunrise. Fishermen cast their nets from reed boats. Farmers bend over their fields, their sickles flashing in rhythm. And from the temple complex, chants rise like incense smoke, layers of melody and devotion woven into the air. Nesyamun's voice joins them, steady and resonant, carrying words that have not been spoken since. Now, in the stillness of his mummified form, that same voice is reborn, not through ritual, but through resonance, through human curiosity and care. The scientists who worked on him spoke of reverence rather than experiment. They were acutely aware that Nesyamun was not just data, he was a man who once breathed, prayed, and dreamed. And when they activated his recreated voice, they did so in silence, as if they were entering a temple. In many ways, their act fulfilled Nesyamun's own wish. His coffin inscriptions ask that his voice be heard in the afterlife, that he may speak to the gods. And now, through the strange mirror of technology, he speaks once more to the living. It blurs the line between ritual and science, between the ancient and the modern. Was this coincidence, or something deeper? Perhaps the Egyptians understood something we're only beginning to rediscover, that the soul is not bound by time, only by silence. His coffin itself remains one of the finest examples of craftsmanship from the late New Kingdom. Painted scenes show him offering incense to a moon, holding scepters, standing before the god Osiris. Hieroglyphs spiral across the surface like delicate vines, filled with invocations for protection, resurrection, and eternal life. On one side, his name gleams beside the title, Servant of the God's Voice. How fitting that his very name proclaims what he has now become. When visitors stand before his mummy in the museum today, many describe a strange quiet, an awareness that feels almost like presence. The way the linen wraps around his face, the soft contours of his jaw, the faint outlines of lips that once shaped the ancient Egyptian tongue, all of it whispers of a life once lived in rhythm and sound. Children lean in close, their voices hushed, as if afraid to disturb the air that carries his echo. But perhaps that's exactly what he would have wanted. To be remembered not as an artifact, but as a living vibration, a bridge between worlds. In that sense, Nesyamun has achieved something truly eternal. He lived for the gods, died for eternity, and now lives again through the breath of science. His single vowel, that faint and fragile tone, carries within it the story of humanity itself, our need to remember, to preserve, to speak across the ages. We can almost imagine him standing once again in the temple, the morning sun breaking over Karnak, the columns lit in gold. His voice, clear and rhythmic, fills the space. Each word rises like light upon stone, a hymn of creation. And though the city has turned to dust, the resonance lingers, carried on by wind, rediscovered by sound. Somewhere in that echo is a truth the ancients always knew. To speak is to live. To be heard, even once more after death, is to be remembered. So when you next see the mummy of Nesyamun, lying beneath museum glass, remember that you are not only looking at a body preserved, you are standing beside a voice that refused to vanish, a priest who prayed that his words would never fade, and through the quiet persistence of human curiosity, they never did. The coffin's carvings still glimmer faintly under soft light. The symbols are careful, symmetrical, perfect. They speak of faith in eternity, that even after the body fades, the name, the sound, the breath will endure, and somehow, impossibly, they were right. A priest's final chant still drifts faintly through time, a whisper crossing 3,000 years, through stone and sand, through silence and science, and in that sound, a single trembling ah, lies everything we've ever longed for, proof that time listens. The finger that pointed to the gods, the Djed Pillar of Osiris. There are places in Egypt where silence has a weight, not the silence of emptiness, but of centuries pressing down, like warm sand upon the bones of memory. One of those places lies deep in the desert near Abydos, a sacred city long before even the first pyramids rose. It was said that the god Osiris himself slept here, and that once a year he awoke, not in flesh, but in symbol. That symbol was the Djed, a pillar carved in stone, standing tall and straight, a column of mystery and meaning that the Egyptians called the very backbone of the world. When the first light touched the temple walls at Abydos, the shadows of the pillars would stretch like long fingers across the floor, and in one of those shadowed corridors, the Djed would stand, an object at once simple and cosmic. 4 bands circled its top, like rings marking the heavens, and its base sunk deep into the earth, anchoring heaven to ground. The Djed was no mere ornament, it was the silent bridge between mortality and eternity. To the people of Egypt, it represented Osiris himself, the god of rebirth, the lord of the afterlife, the eternal cycle of decay and renewal. Every ancient Egyptian knew the Djed, even if they never stood before one. They carved it into amulets and wore it close to the heart. They painted it on tomb walls beside the rising sun. And when kings died, priests raised the Djed in solemn ceremony, a ritual called raising the Djed, meant to restore cosmic order, to ensure that life, after all its endings, would continue again. To understand the Djed, one must first understand Abydos. Before Thebes rose, before the pyramids of Giza gleamed in the sun, Abydos was already holy ground. It was here that Osiris was believed to be buried, or at least where his body was symbolically laid to rest. Pilgrims came from across Egypt to touch the sands of his resting place, to leave offerings, to whisper prayers into the wind that curled around the temple walls. The Djed stood not only for Osiris's strength, but for the strength of the world itself, a cosmic spine holding the universe upright. Imagine for a moment, a day thousands of years ago, a festival day at Abydos. The priests have gathered in their white linen robes. The people wait in the sun, the desert air shimmering. Before the crowd stands a great wooden Djed, taller than a man, bound with ropes. At the priest's command, hundreds of hands pull together. The ropes tighten, creak, and slowly the Djed begins to rise. When at last it stands upright, the crowd erupts in cheers and song. It is as though the god himself has stood again, reborn, to bless the world with stability and life. Even now, when archaeologists uncover fragments of Djeds carved in ivory, gold, or stone, they sense that same reverence. The shape is unmistakable, a straight column topped by 4 horizontal bars, but its meaning goes deeper than its form. Some believe those bars represent the 4 divisions of the heavens. Others think they mark the 4 quarters of the year, the eternal rhythm of seasons that Osiris governs. Still others say, the Djed is not only a pillar, but a tree, the sacred tree that once grew around the body of Osiris, preserving him until he could rise again. In one legend, the body of Osiris was hidden within a tamarisk tree. When the king of Byblos saw its beauty, he had the tree cut and made into a column for his palace. But within that column, Osiris slept. When Isis found him, she wrapped her arms around the Djed and wept, for it contained her husband's spirit. That column became the first Djed, the pillar that pointed to heaven, the silent reminder that no death is truly final. So when the Egyptians carved the Djed, they were not shaping stone, they were shaping hope. The Djed became part of every sacred landscape. It appeared in tombs, on coffins, in jewelry, in temples from Memphis to Thebes. Even pharaohs wore Djed amulets during coronation, a sign that they ruled not only Egypt but the cosmic balance itself. To raise the Djed was to renew life, to promise that order, Ma'at, would always prevail over chaos. At Abydos in the Temple of Seti I, you can still find the Djed carved deep into walls that shimmer faintly under the desert sun. It stands beside the Ankh, the symbol of life, and the scepter, the symbol of power. Together they form a trinity: stability, life, dominion, the eternal gifts of Osiris. When you stand before those carvings today, you can almost hear the low hum of ritual long vanished, the whisper of priests reciting ancient hymns to awaken the god once more. Archaeologists who have studied the Djed still debate its origin. Some believe it began as a stylized sheaf of reeds, bound together as a sign of strength. Others think it represented a wooden pole used in early ritual or a column of stacked vertebrae, hence its later connection to Osiris's spine. Whatever its origin, it evolved into one of Egypt's most enduring symbols, the vertical line that joins heaven and earth. To touch the Djed was to touch eternity, to carve it was to declare faith in resurrection, and to raise it, as they did each year, was to reenact creation itself. Over time, the Djed came to represent not only Osiris but the human condition, the desire to stand firm amid the shifting sands of life. Perhaps that is why its image survived for over 3,000 years, unchanged, unforgotten. When empires fell and temples crumbled, the Djed remained, carved into the stone like a heartbeat etched into time. Today, when one visits Abydos, the Djed still appears, carved into pillars that catch the sunlight, their edges softened by age. The wind that moves through those halls carries the scent of sand and faint echoes of prayer. If you close your eyes, you might imagine the priests once more, their voices rising in rhythm, hands lifting the sacred pillar upright, as if helping the world to stand again. But perhaps the Djed's true mystery is not in stone, but in meaning. The Egyptians believed that stability was divine, that for the sun to rise, for the Nile to flood, for the stars to move, the cosmos must remain in balance. And so they gave the universe a spine, a pillar to hold it steady, and they called it the Djed. In the Book of the Dead, the Djed appears in spells meant to help the soul rise again. One reads, "Raise yourself, Osiris, you have not died." The symbol, when drawn or spoken, had power. It was not metaphor but invocation. To say the word Djed was to speak endurance into existence. Even the act of carving it was a prayer. For the Egyptians, death was never an end, only a horizon. They built their world to reflect that eternal truth, that behind the desert, the sun would rise again. Behind the tomb's door, life would bloom again. The Djed, standing firm, became that eternal promise. When Howard Carter and other early Egyptologists first uncovered Djeds in tombs, they puzzled over their simplicity. Compared to the grandeur of sarcophagi or gold amulets, the Djed seemed modest. But as they translated hieroglyphs and studied ritual texts, they realized the truth. The Djed was not decoration, it was the axis upon which everything else turned. In the tomb of Tutankhamun, a small gold Djed was found among the treasures. It rested near the heart, the center of being. It was meant to give the young pharaoh the strength to rise again, as Osiris had. Even queens and nobles wore Djed pendants, invoking stability for their journeys through the afterlife. And yet there is something deeply human in this symbol. In every age, people have sought to anchor their world against change, to build something unshakable amid uncertainty. For Egypt, that anchor was divine. For us, it may be memory, or love, or the stories we pass down through time. But the longing is the same, to remain upright, to endure. At night, the Djed of Abydos glowed by torchlight. The priests would walk its perimeter, chanting softly as they prepared for the raising ritual. The air smelled of incense and sand. Beyond the temple, the desert spread out, vast and quiet, under a sky so wide it seemed eternal. And in that vastness, the pillar stood, pointing upward, toward the realm of the gods. Perhaps the Djed was never merely an object, but an idea, a promise carved into matter, a whisper that said, "Though you may fall, you shall rise again." And so it has, in stone, in memory, in meaning. The Djed still stands, through the rise and fall of empires, through the silence of millennia. It is the finger that pointed to the gods, the spine that held the heavens, the quiet strength of a people who built eternity from sand and faith. And in its shadow, the wind still moves softly, as if breathing life once more into the pillar that refuses to fall. The box that held the afterlife. Deep beneath the cliffs of Thebes, where the desert air grows still and every sound fades into dust, there lies a tomb unlike any other, the resting place of a young pharaoh, guarded by something neither alive nor dead. When Howard Carter first stepped into the Valley of the Kings in 1922, he could not have known that behind one of those sealed doors waited not only gold and glory, but a shrine, built for the god who walked between life and death, Anubis. It was small, compared to the grand sarcophagus that held the pharaoh, but it drew every eye. A black jackal crouched atop a gilded chest, silent, alert, watching. Its surface gleamed softly beneath the torchlight, the gold panels etched with prayers and protective spells. The eyes of the jackal, inlaid with shining obsidian and calcite, seemed to shimmer, as if aware. This was no ordinary statue. It was the shrine of Anubis, the box that held the tools and amulets used in the sacred rites of embalming, the rituals that allowed the soul to leave the body, pass through judgment, and reach the field of reeds, Egypt's afterlife. To look upon it was to look upon the threshold of eternity itself. Anubis, the black jackal god, was ancient even when the pyramids were young. He was the watcher of tombs, the guide of souls, the one who weighed the heart against the feather of truth. In every funerary chamber, in every spell of the Book of the Dead, his presence lingered, not as a god of death, but as a guardian of passage. The shrine that bore his likeness, found in the tomb of Tutankhamun, was meant to protect everything sacred within, the oils, the amulets, the secret instruments of transformation. It was built like a miniature temple, carved wood overlaid with gold leaf, its legs resting upon a carrying frame for the priests to bear in procession. The jackal lay upon it, poised for eternity, its sleek form stretching toward something unseen. In the flickering lamplight, Carter's team described the scene as eerie and reverent all at once. The air was heavy with the scent of ancient resins and dust that had not moved for 3,000 years. The black form of Anubis seemed to hover between shadow and gold, both guardian and guide. and as they looked upon it, they realized they were standing in a place the Egyptians had designed not merely to bury a king, but to recreate the cosmos itself. In ancient belief, death was not an end, but a transition, one that required careful preparation, sacred knowledge, and divine assistance. The shrine of Anubis was the very heart of that process. Within its box were linen bandages, precious unguents, and symbols tied to the spells of resurrection. The Egyptians believed that through these sacred tools, the priest, acting as Anubis himself, could help the dead shed their earthly form and awaken into eternity. Imagine the ritual. A body lies upon the embalming table, its form washed in pure Nile water and fragrant oils. Around it the priests chant softly in a language older than writing itself. One priest dons the mask of Anubis, a black jackal's head that glints in the lamplight, and bends over the body, performing rites of protection. He places a scarab upon the heart, a djed upon the spine, an ankh upon the lips. Then, from a gilded box beside him, this box, he takes small jars and amulets, murmuring the names of the gods as he works. When at last the body is ready, he seals the wrappings with resins and places his hands upon the chest, whispering the words of awakening, "Rise, O justified one, for you shall live again." This was the moment when death became eternity. The box was not simply a container, it was a portal. Within it, the tools of rebirth waited, like seeds in sacred soil. When Tutankhamun was laid to rest, his priests placed this shrine near the entrance of his burial chamber, as if Anubis himself would stand watch, guarding the passage between the world of men and the realm of the gods. They believed that the god's presence would frighten away evil spirits and keep the pharaoh's soul safe until it reached judgment. But even after thousands of years, the figure of Anubis remains hauntingly lifelike. The jackal's body is sleek and stretched, its tail neatly folded, its eyes gleaming with a gaze that seems to pierce the dark. The gold shimmer beneath its paws reflects the light like desert sun on sand. There is something about its stillness, not lifeless, but waiting. Those who stood before it in modern times often spoke of the strange atmosphere it created, a sense that time itself was holding its breath. Perhaps it was imagination. Or perhaps, as the ancient Egyptians believed, objects made for the gods were more than art. They were vessels, alive with purpose. The shrine of Anubis was found sealed, its cords uncut. When Carter's team finally untied the knots, they discovered small packets of resin and ritual implements inside, everything carefully arranged. Each item carried a hieroglyphic label naming its role in the burial rites. The precision was astonishing. Not the work of craftsmen merely, but of priests creating something sacred. On the outer panels of the box were painted protective deities and texts from the Book of the Dead. These were not decorative flourishes, they were spells, written to ensure that the king's journey through the Duat, the underworld, would be smooth. To the Egyptians, words were power. To inscribe a name or prayer was to bind it to eternity, and so the very surface of the shrine was alive with intention, a golden text of protection and rebirth. When the tomb was first opened, some workers whispered that disturbing such an object might bring a curse. After all, it was Anubis, the god of embalming, whose jackals were said to roam the necropolis at night, keeping the balance between the living and the dead. Carter, practical and modern-minded, ignored the talk. Yet, not long after, strange accidents followed. A canary devoured by a cobra, the sudden illness of visitors, lights flickering in the valley. For some, these were coincidences. For others, it was the god's quiet reminder that even in the age of science, mystery still guards its own. In the mythology of Egypt, Anubis's duty was sacred and solemn. He did not kill, he protected. He did not punish, he guided. In the judgment hall, he stood beside the scales, weighing the heart of the deceased against the feather of Matat, the truth. If the heart was light, the soul was free to pass on. If heavy with sin, it was devoured by Ammit, the eater of hearts. And so, in the tomb, his shrine served as a promise that truth and justice would guide the pharaoh even beyond death. As centuries passed and empires fell, the jackal shrine waited. Sealed in silence, undisturbed, it watched as desert winds shifted dunes and erased the footsteps of kings. Above, the sun rose and set thousands of times, gilding the cliffs in the same light that once touched its golden surface. And beneath, in darkness, the god kept vigil. When we gaze upon it now, encased in museum glass, its eyes still glint with that same light, not the light of the sun, but the light of memory. It carries with it the hum of the ancient ritual, the warmth of the torchlight in the embalming hall, the whispered prayers of those who once believed that to honor the dead was to sustain the living. There is something profoundly peaceful in that idea, that death, far from being an ending, was a continuation of order. For the Egyptians, every act, from building a tomb to placing a jar, was a way of maintaining harmony between heaven and earth. And so the shrine's stillness was not emptiness, it was vigilance. In the carvings around the Valley of the Kings, Anubis appears again and again, black against gold, his long ears alert. Sometimes he is shown kneeling before Osiris, sometimes guiding the pharaoh by hand, sometimes tending the heart upon the scales, but always he is present, as if no soul can reach eternity without passing beneath his watchful gaze. In that sense, the shrine in Tutankhamun's tomb was more than a guardian for one king. It was a symbol of the enduring human wish to be remembered, to be guided, to be at peace. Even today, when archaeologists brush sand from its surface, the air around it seems to thicken with time. The scent of ancient oils lingers faintly, and if one stands quietly enough, it's easy to imagine the soft chanting of priests echoing through the corridors once more, their words rising into the dark, asking Anubis to open the way. The box may be silent, but its silence speaks of faith and fear, of hope wrapped in gold and cedar. It is the still heart of a civilization that believed in eternity, not as fantasy, but as structure, as truth. It is in every sense the box that held the afterlife, and in its presence, even now, you can almost feel that crossing, that moment between breath and forever, where the god waits, patient and eternal, guarding the path beyond the horizon of life. In the hush of eternity that clings to the Valley of the Kings, there rests a box of obsidian black and gold, its lid adorned with the silent form of Anubis, the jackal god who weighs the hearts of men. Yet to call it a box diminishes what it truly is. The shrine of Anubis is a chamber within a chamber, a guardian within a tomb, crafted not merely to hold offerings but to hold the fragile bridge between life and death. When archaeologists first uncovered it, they were struck not by treasure, but by presence. The air around it seemed to hum softly, as though it had waited, undisturbed, through the rise and fall of empires. Resting on a sledge with golden handles, the shrine was positioned facing west, the land of the dead, the horizon where Ra's sun slipped each night into darkness. It stood watch beside the tomb of Tutankhamun, carved and painted with the language of eternity. The jackal atop the shrine, carved from wood and coated with black resin, was life-sized, its sleek form poised as though mid-step. In the glow of the archaeologist's lamps, the creature's glass eyes shimmered with a strange vitality, catching and holding the light. Beneath its steady gaze was the shrine itself, a chest with doors sealed by golden cord, imprinted with the royal stamp. Inside, they found ceremonial equipment, bandages, oils, and small ritual figures that had accompanied the embalming of kings. But the true mystery of the shrine was not its contents, it was its meaning. The shrine of Anubis symbolized more than guardianship, it was a passageway. The ancient priests believed that Anubis stood at the threshold between worlds, ensuring that no spirit wandered astray. His shrine was not meant to contain death, but to keep the forces that threatened it, chaos, darkness, and forgetfulness, at bay. It was protection embodied in form. When the priests of the 18th dynasty sealed it, they likely whispered spells from the Book of the Dead, verses that bound the divine essence to the wood and gold. They believed that words could awaken guardians, that symbols could sustain them for millennia, and perhaps they were right. For when modern eyes gazed upon the shrine again, it seemed to still remember. Inside the shrine were amulets shaped like eyes and hearts, each inscribed with prayers to preserve the Ka, the vital essence of the soul. One fragment, barely legible, read, "May the guardian of the necropolis guide you, O noble one, and keep your heart steadfast in truth." Such phrases were not mere poetry, they were keys to eternity, codes that ensured the spirit of the pharaoh would find peace and rebirth. Every symbol carved into its frame told a story. The hieroglyphs of the jackal, the feather of Mot, the loop of the Ankh, all wove together in sacred geometry. These were not decorative marks but mathematical and spiritual formulas designed to align the shrine with cosmic order. To the Egyptians, creation itself was bound by balance, and even the smallest ritual object echoed that truth. Imagine, then, the priests during the burial procession. They carry the shrine on poles draped in linens and incense smoke. They move slowly, chanting hymns that rise and fall like the desert wind. The torches flicker on the polished gold. In their belief, Anubis walks beside them, invisible but present, guiding their steps to the resting chamber. Once placed, the shrine would never be touched again by human hands. Its purpose complete, its silence eternal. Thousands of years later, that silence was broken by the sound of modern excavation. Howard Carter's team documented it meticulously. Though they too seemed to sense that the shrine was more than artifact, it was memory made tangible. As they photographed and cataloged, they spoke in hushed tones. There was something sacred about the way the jackal still guarded the dark, as though time itself had bent around it. It's easy, from a modern perspective, to see the shrine as just another object of craftsmanship, but in truth, it represents a worldview where matter and spirit were inseparable. The Egyptians did not worship death, they mastered it, transforming it into continuity. The shrine of Anubis was not meant to end a story, but to ensure it never ended at all. The shrine's structure mirrors a cosmic idea that the universe is layered, with thresholds between the living and the divine. Just as the tomb was a microcosm of the heavens, so too was the shrine a microcosm of the soul. Within its golden walls, offerings were placed not only for the body, but for the essence that moved beyond it. And so, in the dim light of the tomb, the jackal keeps his eternal watch. Around him, silence reigns. the same silence that filled the chamber when the last torch was extinguished by ancient hands. In that silence, you can almost hear the whisper of priests reciting the old words, "May your heart be weighed and found true." Perhaps that is the true mystery of the Shrine of Anubis, not what it contains, but what it still holds. The promise that death is not an end but a crossing, that beyond the veil of time and dust, guardians still stand at the gates of the afterlife, their eyes fixed on eternity, waiting for the souls they once vowed to protect. Even now, in the museum's quiet halls, the jackal seems alive in his stillness. His gaze follows you, not with menace but with memory, as though reminding you that all of us, in our way, are still being guided, that there are thresholds yet unseen, and guardians still keeping watch, unseen but eternal, over the fragile passage between life and what lies beyond. The needle that pierced time. Cleopatra's eternal obelisk of Heliopolis. In the golden lands of Egypt, where the desert stretches endlessly and the Nile winds like a silver thread through fertile soil, there exists a monument whose sheer presence defies centuries and civilizations. Cleopatra's Needle, an obelisk of polished red granite, rises with austere elegance, a stone sentinel reaching for the sky, carrying within it the ambition, faith, and genius of ancient Egypt. To those who first laid eyes upon it, it was more than a stone spire. It was a bridge to the divine, a conduit between the earth and the heavens, a declaration of the pharaoh's eternal connection to the gods. Carved with inscriptions and hieroglyphs, each line immortalized the victories of kings, the blessings of gods, and the meticulous devotion of artisans who labored tirelessly to shape the stone into a monument that would outlast the rise and fall of empires. Commissioned during the reign of Pharaoh Thutmose III, Cleopatra's Needle began its existence as a single, colossal monolith quarried from the granite-rich lands of Aswan. At over 224 tons, the monolith was an engineering marvel, demonstrating the ingenuity of a civilization that had mastered stone, geometry, and labor coordination long before modern machinery. Workers, moving in careful rhythm along lubricated sledges, transported the obelisk hundreds of kilometers northward along the Nile, the river serving as both highway and lifeline. Songs and chants echoed across the banks as the massive stone inched forward, a testament to human determination and the collective effort of countless hands guided by a vision that stretched beyond the horizon. Upon its arrival at Heliopolis, the obelisk was erected in a ceremonial plaza, flanked by temples dedicated to Ra, the sun god. The process of raising it required an intricate combination of ramps, levers, and sheer coordination, as if the pharaoh himself commanded the cosmos to bend to the will of his people. Every surface was polished, and every glyph carved with precision, ensuring that the obelisk would communicate its story to generations yet unborn. It stood not merely as a monument, but as a living testament to the divine order, the concept of Ma'at, which governed Egyptian understanding of the universe. Time flowed around the obelisk as dynasties rose and fell. Pharaohs, priests, and scribes added inscriptions, layering history upon history, turning the stone into a chronicle etched in granite. It bore witness to the construction of temples, the ebb of empires, and the relentless transformation of the Nile Valley. Though human lives were fleeting, the obelisk remained steadfast, a silent observer of centuries of devotion, conquest, and culture. It was not just stone, it was memory, a sacred relic connecting mortals to the eternal. By the 19th century, Cleopatra's Needle had become a gift of diplomacy. The Egyptian government presented it to Britain, a gesture laden with symbolism and grandeur. The challenge of moving the obelisk from Heliopolis to the banks of the Thames was immense. Engineers designed iron cylinders, reinforced vessels, and intricate transportation systems to move the 224-ton monument safely through the river and across the sea. Storms and mechanical failures threatened the journey, yet the obelisk persisted, a testament to its resilience and the reverence it commanded. When it finally arrived in London in 1878, it was celebrated not only as a feat of engineering, but as a cultural treasure connecting two worlds separated by thousands of miles and millennia. Standing on the Victoria Embankment, Cleopatra's Needle was placed with careful alignment to reflect its original orientation in Heliopolis. The inscriptions, weathered but still legible, revealed names of pharaohs, religious invocations, and the achievements of those who first commissioned it. Scholars studied its surface, tracing every symbol, every line, as though each glyph were a heartbeat of the past. The obelisk now stood not only as an artifact of Egypt, but as a living bridge across time, a dialogue between the ancient Nile and the modern Thames, connecting humanity across centuries and continents. The aura of mystery surrounding Cleopatra's Needle has persisted for centuries. Travelers and locals alike have felt an almost imperceptible energy, a vibration that seems to resonate through the stone, as if the obelisk itself remembers the hands that carved it and the eyes that first beheld it. Ancient Egyptians believed obelisks could focus divine energy, linking earth and sky, mortal and god. Perhaps even today, standing before its massive form, one can sense the reverence of the ancients, the devotion that raised such a monument, and the silent testimony of a civilization that sought immortality through stone. The inscriptions tell stories not only of military victories but of faith, duty, and cosmic balance. Pharaohs were intermediaries between mortals and gods, tasked with upholding Ma'at. The obelisk, with its towering form and carefully carved glyphs, was both symbol and instrument, ensuring the sun's journey and the universe's order were mirrored in human society. The rising and setting sun casts long shadows along the Thames, recreating, in miniature, the divine function it once served in Heliopolis. The obelisk is more than a monument, it is an active participant in the eternal rhythm of the cosmos. Throughout its history, Cleopatra's Needle has captivated the imagination. Artists, poets, and historians have drawn inspiration from its form, marveling at the craftsmanship and ambition it represents. Children press their hands against the stone, travelers take photographs, and scholars continue to decipher its hieroglyphs, each interaction a continuation of its story. The obelisk, silent yet eloquent, invites reflection on the ingenuity, faith, and determination of the civilization that first set it upright. This obelisk is not just a relic of ancient Egypt, it is a testament to human ambition. It symbolizes the intersection of art, engineering, faith, and history. It reminds those who stand before it of the power of devotion and the endurance of human endeavor. Cleopatra's Needle pierces time not only with its physical form but with its story, a narrative carved in stone, bridging past and present, Egypt and the world, mortal and divine. And so Cleopatra's Needle continues to stand, a silent sentinel, whispering across centuries. It tells of pharaohs and priests, of Nile waters and desert sands, of hands that labored and visions that soared. Each shadow, each glint of sunlight, each line of inscription carries the weight of history. Its presence evokes awe, curiosity, and reverence, proving that while civilizations rise and fall, the stories carved into stone remain eternal, inviting all who encounter it to connect with the human spirit and the divine mysteries that inspired its creation. The obelisk is a needle piercing, not only the sky, but the very fabric of time, a monument to endurance, devotion, and the timeless ambition of humankind. Its story continues, waiting for those who are willing to look closely, to listen, and to let the stone speak its secrets of millennia past. The journey of Cleopatra's Needle from its ancient home in Heliopolis to the heart of London is a story of ambition, perseverance, and remarkable engineering, rivaling the monumental vision of the pharaohs themselves. While the obelisk had endured centuries of sun, wind, and sand in Egypt, its relocation across thousands of miles of land and sea became a narrative as compelling as its origin. In the late 19th century, British interest in Egyptian antiquities surged alongside a global fascination with archaeology and empire. Cleopatra's Needle, with its towering form and ancient inscriptions, represented not only a priceless artifact but also a connection to the grandeur of Egypt, a tangible link to a civilization whose mastery of art, mathematics, and engineering still amazed modern minds. Transporting the monolith across the Nile to the Mediterranean was a challenge that required both innovation and courage. Engineers constructed custom cradles and reinforced barges capable of supporting the obelisk's massive weight. Every decision was critical. A single miscalculation could have shattered the granite, undoing millennia of careful preservation. The obelisk's journey through rivers and open waters mirrored the trials faced by the ancient Egyptians who had first moved it, a reminder that ingenuity and determination remain constants across the centuries. Alongside the Nile, onlookers watched in awe as the enormous stone moved inch by inch, a slow but inexorable march, echoing the patience and discipline of the craftsmen who had carved it centuries earlier. Crossing the Mediterranean introduced new hazards. Storms and treacherous waves tested the resilience of both vessel and crew. Historical records tell of nights when the obelisk rocked violently aboard the specially designed iron cylinder, threatening to overturn. Men clung desperately to ropes, steering the vessel with a combination of strength, skill, and prayer, hoping to preserve the obelisk's integrity. These moments of suspense, tension, and human determination transformed the artifact into a living narrative, a testament not only to ancient ambition but to modern daring. Every wave that struck was a reminder that this piece of granite had survived millennia, and yet, it was now at the mercy of new challenges, proving that history itself is fragile and yet enduring. Upon its arrival in the Thames in 1878, Cleopatra's Needle was met with public awe. Thousands gathered along the riverbank to witness the spectacle. The obelisk was transported to a specially prepared site on the Victoria Embankment, where it would stand as a symbol of British admiration for Egyptian civilization, and as a gift commemorating diplomacy, science, and cultural exchange. Engineers and laborers orchestrated the final raising of the obelisk with meticulous care. Ramps were built, winches operated, and a combination of levers and sheer human effort lifted the granite into its upright position. When it finally stood tall and unwavering, It was as if the monument itself had exhaled after centuries of slumber, asserting its eternal presence in a new land. The inscriptions, worn yet distinct, became the subject of endless fascination. Egyptologists meticulously studied every hieroglyph, attempting to reconstruct the stories and intentions of pharaohs who had long since passed. The obelisk bore the names and achievements of Thutmose III and Ramesses II, each line a window into ancient ceremonial life, the politics of dynasties, and the spiritual beliefs that shaped the Nile Valley. Observers noted how the stone seemed to hum with history, as if the hands that had carved it, the priests who had consecrated it, and the kings who had commissioned it were still present, their voices echoing faintly through the centuries. Over time, Cleopatra's Needle became more than a monument. It became a cultural landmark. Artists sketched its silhouette against the London skyline, poets invoked its eternal presence in verse, and photographers captured its solemn majesty. Children climbed nearby walls, tourists pressed cameras to their eyes, and historians marveled at the precision of its construction. Every season added a new layer of experience, sunlight glinting off its polished surfaces, shadows stretching across the embankment, raindrops tracing the inscriptions with shimmering rivulets. Even in an urban environment far removed from the deserts of Egypt, the obelisk retained its dignity, carrying the aura of its origin into the modern era. Legends and myths became intertwined with its existence. Some whispered that the obelisk had magical properties, that standing beneath it could invoke a sense of connection to the ancient Nile or bring clarity to those seeking wisdom. Others recounted tales of mysterious occurrences during its transportation, stories of storms that seemed unnatural, as if the gods themselves had watched the journey. Whether truth or folklore, these narratives reinforced the obelisk's role not just as a historical artifact, but as a symbol of mystery, endurance, and human aspiration. The obelisk also served as a silent witness to history unfolding around it in London. World wars, industrial revolutions, social upheavals, and scientific progress all took place in its shadow. It remained immovable, indifferent, yet dignified, a reminder that human endeavors, however monumental or fleeting, are part of a larger continuum. Its presence prompted reflection on the contrast between ancient and modern civilizations, the fleeting nature of power, and the enduring nature of faith, art, and ambition. Scholars continue to study the obelisk today, uncovering details of its origin, the techniques used to carve and transport it, and the deeper meanings encoded in the hieroglyphs. Each discovery adds to its story, revealing new insights into the civilization that produced it, the religious and political landscape of ancient Egypt, and the meticulous craft that transformed raw granite into a monument that could withstand millennia. The obelisk is a conversation across time, a dialogue between the pharaohs and modern observers, between history and the present moment. Even now, visitors to London can stand before Cleopatra's Needle and feel the weight of centuries. Its sheer size and the precision of its form command respect. While the inscriptions invite curiosity and study, observers often find themselves contemplating the hands that carved it, the Nile that carried it, the workers who transported it, and the ingenuity required at every stage. The obelisk embodies a journey not only of stone but of human determination, faith, and creativity. In its essence, Cleopatra's Needle is timeless. It is a needle piercing both the sky and history itself, a monument to human ambition, divine aspiration, and the endurance of culture. It reminds us that while empires rise and fall, stones endure, stories persist, and the connection between humanity and the divine remains eternal. Standing before it, one can sense the passage of millennia, the echo of pharaohs' voices, and the silent majesty of a civilization that dared to reach beyond the earth to touch the heavens. As centuries continue to pass, Cleopatra's Needle remains a symbol of connection between past and present, east and west, human ambition and divine inspiration. It is both a historical artifact and a living monument, inspiring awe, reflection, and wonder in all who behold it. The story of this obelisk is far from over. It continues in the eyes of those who study it, touch it, and contemplate the civilizations that created it, reminding us that the echoes of the past can resonate powerfully in the present, forever piercing the veil of time. The mirror that saw eternity, the bronze reflection of Queen Tiye. Long before the bustling streets of modern Thebes, before the temples rose with their grand columns and sacred statues, there was a queen whose presence echoed through the corridors of time, leaving behind objects that whispered of her power, her grace, and the mystique surrounding her life. Among these relics, one stands out in its silent majesty, a bronze mirror, polished so finely that it seemed to hold not just a reflection of flesh, but of eternity itself. This mirror, belonging to Queen Tiye, the formidable consort of Pharaoh Amenhotep III, offers us a glimpse into a world that has long since faded, yet remains eternally present in the artifacts left behind. It is not merely an object of vanity, it is a portal into the life of a woman who wielded influence, intellect, and divine authority in a time when Egypt's power stretched across lands, rivers, and deserts. Queen Tiye's life was extraordinary. She was not a queen merely by marriage but by lineage and intellect. Her father, Yuya, held powerful offices, and her mother, Thuya, was equally esteemed, linking Tiye to an intricate web of nobility and divine ancestry. In a society where royal women could be revered or overshadowed, Tiye carved out a position that transcended tradition. She advised, she influenced, and she maintained her presence in the political, religious, and cultural spheres of ancient Egypt. And in her chambers, amidst fine linen and incense, her bronze mirror reflected not just her visage, but the weight of authority she carried, a weight that even centuries later, scholars, archaeologists, and admirers feel when studying her legacy. The mirror itself is deceptively simple. Crafted from bronze, it has survived millennia, retaining a shimmer that evokes the sun's reflection upon the Nile. The metal is flawless in its smoothness, yet it bears subtle marks of use, faint scratches where fingertips brushed, tiny nicks along the edges from careful handling. Each imperfection tells a story of daily rituals, of preparation for ceremonies, of moments when Queen Tiye's reflection was an affirmation of both personal beauty and sovereign power. Mirrors in ancient Egypt were not just for adornment, they were symbols. They represented the reflection of divine order, the duality between the earthly and the celestial. A mirror such as this one was believed to contain fragments of the eternal, capable of capturing both the soul and the essence of its user. When Tiye gazed into it, she did not merely see her face, she saw her role in the vast machinery of divine kingship, the reflection of Egypt's glory, and her part in shaping it. Historians speculate on the ways Tiye used such an object. Perhaps she held it before anointing rituals, applying precious oils that glimmered in the sunlight filtering through her chamber. Perhaps she used it to prepare for audiences, ensuring that her expression conveyed both grace and command, signaling subtly to emissaries and courtiers alike that she was not to be underestimated. Bronze mirrors were heavy, often mounted in wooden handles or stands, and their reflective surface required careful maintenance, polishing with fine powders, rubbing with cloths to achieve the perfect sheen. These small acts of care, mundane though they may seem, connected the queen to centuries of tradition, each movement a repetition of gestures handed down through generations of Egyptian women who wielded power quietly, yet profoundly. The mirror also serves as a silent witness to the cultural and spiritual practices of the 18th dynasty. Egypt was at the height of its power during Tiye's life. Monumental temples rose along the Nile, adorned with statues, hieroglyphs, and reliefs that chronicled the reign of Amenhotep III. Religious rituals filled the air with incense, and priestly chants resonated in vast halls. Within this grand tapestry of devotion and ceremonial splendor, the queen's mirror functioned as both a personal and sacred object. It symbolized the reflection of Matat, the divine order that governed the universe. By gazing upon herself, Tiye was, in essence, aligning her image with cosmic harmony, affirming her role as an earthly counterpart to the divine, a steward of both kingdom and eternity. Archaeologists who have studied the bronze mirror emphasize its artistry. Unlike mirrors made from polished stone or obsidian, the bronze surface could be cast, hammered, and finished to near perfection. This required advanced metallurgical knowledge, including an understanding of alloys, heat treatment, and surface finishing. The mirror's creation would have involved artisans of the highest skill, specialists whose work was reserved for royalty and high priests. Each mirror, though functional, was also a testament to the ingenuity of ancient Egyptian craftsmen. By examining the mirror today, one can appreciate not only its reflective properties, but also the centuries of technical expertise that made it possible. Yet the mirror's true significance transcends craftsmanship. It is a symbol of continuity and memory. When Queen Tiye passed, the mirror may have accompanied her to the afterlife, placed carefully within her tomb to ensure that she could see herself in eternity, just as she had in life. In Egyptian belief, the afterlife was a reflection of the earthly realm, an eternal continuation of existence. Objects placed with the deceased were charged with power, intended to serve, protect, and remind. The bronze mirror therefore becomes more than a tool. It is a guardian of memory, a vessel of identity preserved through centuries, speaking across time to those who stand before it and imagine the queen's gaze upon the world she helped shape. As we consider the mirror today, we confront the fragility of history. The bronze has endured, yet the world around it has transformed countless times. Cities have risen and fallen, dynasties have faded into legend, and even the mighty Nile has shifted course. The mirror remains, quiet, reflecting nothing, yet holding everything: the ambitions, the daily rituals, the cosmic understanding, and the human essence of Queen Tiye. For those who study it, for those who admire it, the mirror is a reminder of the power of objects to carry stories across millennia, to bridge the distance between past and present, and to offer insight into lives that would otherwise be lost to time. The Queen's image, once cast upon the bronze surface, resonates with us now. Scholars reconstruct her life from fragments of text, from letters, inscriptions, and the remains of her tomb. But the mirror offers something different. It offers the intimacy of daily life, the soft contours of her face, the sharp intelligence in her eyes, the quiet authority she carried without ostentation. It is a window into the private moments of a woman whose public influence shaped an empire. And as one imagines her reflection, one cannot help but feel a sense of closeness, a whisper from antiquity that reaches across the centuries. In the echo of the past, the bronze mirror also speaks to the enduring human desire to preserve identity. Across cultures, mirrors have been objects of fascination, instruments of beauty, and symbols of self-awareness. Yet in the case of Queen Tiye, this mirror assumes a heightened significance. It is not merely about appearance, it is about understanding one's place in a vast, ordered cosmos, about ensuring that legacy and memory persist beyond mortal existence. Each gaze into the polished bronze was an act of affirmation, a silent declaration of presence and power, a ritual that reinforced both the queen's authority and her connection to the eternal. The mirror that saw eternity does more than reflect. It tells a story, and that story is woven into the very fabric of Egyptian history. It speaks of artistry, of political acumen, of religious devotion, and of the delicate interplay between the mundane and the divine. Every scratch, every glint of polished bronze, every subtle imperfection is a verse in the narrative of a queen whose life was as extraordinary as the empire she helped guide. And as centuries passed, and dynasties rose and fell, the mirror remained, a silent witness to history, a steadfast companion to eternity, and a bridge between the human and the divine. As we continue our journey into the life of Queen Tiye through the silent witness of her bronze mirror, it becomes clear that this artifact is not merely a reflection of the past. It is a living conduit to the rituals, relationships, and spiritual beliefs that defined one of ancient Egypt's most remarkable women. Beyond the sheen of polished bronze, beyond the faint traces of touch left by fingertips centuries ago, this mirror carries within it the echoes of ceremonies, whispers of strategy, and the quiet dignity of a queen whose influence extended far beyond the chambers of her palace. Queen Tiye's significance in Egyptian history cannot be overstated. While Pharaoh Amenhotep III reigned over an empire that stretched from Nubia to Syria, Tiye was no silent consort. She engaged directly in matters of state, diplomacy, and religion, corresponding with foreign rulers and advising her husband on complex political decisions. Her presence in inscriptions and monuments suggests she was venerated almost as a co-sovereign, a rare honor for a woman of her time. The mirror, delicate yet enduring, likely played a role in these moments. It allowed her to present not only her physical form but also a cultivated projection of authority, intelligence, and poise. Every time she looked into its polished surface, she was reminded of her responsibilities, her place in the cosmic order, and the legacy she was creating. The symbolic importance of mirrors in ancient Egypt adds a profound layer to our understanding. Mirrors were more than personal grooming tools, they were objects imbued with religious significance. The Egyptians believed that mirrors could capture more than appearances, they could trap light, essence, and even fragments of the soul. A queen's mirror was thus a sacred object, linking her to Ma'at, the concept of truth, balance, and universal order. Through this lens, the bronze mirror of Tiye becomes both a practical and spiritual instrument. It reflects her image, yes, but it also aligns her with the divine order that underpinned the Egyptian worldview. Her gaze into the mirror was an affirmation of her connection to the gods, a reinforcement of her divine right to advise and guide the pharaoh, and a ritual act ensuring the stability of the kingdom. Consider the context of the 18th dynasty, the era in which Tiye lived. Egypt was a civilization at its zenith, its cities thriving with commerce, monumental architecture, and a rich tapestry of cultural achievement. Luxurious palaces adorned with frescoes, statues, and intricately carved furniture spoke to the wealth and sophistication of the royal court. Within these spaces, the mirror served as a private counterpart to public grandeur, a tool for reflection, preparation, and alignment with both worldly and spiritual responsibilities. In a culture obsessed with symbolism, every object was carefully chosen, every ritual meticulously executed, and every image carefully curated. The mirror was an extension of Tj herself, a physical manifestation of her attention to detail, her ritual precision, and her understanding of power. The craftsmanship of the bronze mirror is nothing short of extraordinary. Artisans of the time possessed advanced knowledge of metallurgy, capable of casting, hammering, and polishing bronze to a near-perfect finish. The mirror's surface is smooth to the touch, yet resilient enough to endure thousands of years, standing as a testament to the skill and expertise of ancient Egyptian craftsmen. Scholars suggest that the creation of such a mirror would have required a combination of high-quality bronze, precise heating techniques, and meticulous polishing with abrasive powders. The result is a mirror that does more than reflect, it mesmerizes, drawing the observer into a contemplation of both the object and the life it once illuminated. Archaeological studies reveal more than technical prowess, they hint at the personal life of Tiye. The mirror may have been used daily, part of a morning ritual where the queen applied oils, adjusted her elaborate hairstyles, and prepared for audiences with the pharaoh, priests, or visiting dignitaries. In these private moments, she would have looked into the mirror not merely for vanity, but for preparation, strategy, and mindfulness. Every glance was an act of introspection, a reaffirmation of her role as an influential partner to the pharaoh and as a guardian of Egypt's stability. The mirror, though silent, witnessed these intimate rituals, holding within its polished surface the countless decisions, contemplations, and contemplative pauses of one of history's most remarkable queens. Beyond its practical use, the mirror also played a role in funerary and religious contexts. Mirrors were often placed in tombs as part of burial goods, intended to serve the deceased in the afterlife. They symbolized the continuation of life beyond death, allowing the individual to maintain identity and presence even after leaving the mortal world. For Queen Tiye, whose legacy was intertwined with the divine and the eternal, her mirror may have been a conduit to the afterlife, a tangible object ensuring that her reflection, her essence, and her influence would endure beyond temporal boundaries. The mirror's survival over millennia attests to the reverence and care with which it was treated, both in life and in death. As modern viewers, we encounter the mirror not only as a historical artifact, but also as a bridge between worlds. It connects us to the daily life of a queen who shaped diplomacy, religion, and culture. It reflects the sophisticated artistry of ancient Egypt, and it evokes the spiritual philosophies that permeated every aspect of her existence. When standing before the mirror today, one is compelled to imagine the queen herself, adjusting her jewelry, smoothing her hair, gazing at the reflection that affirmed both her beauty and her authority. Through its silent presence, the bronze mirror tells a story of power, devotion, and the relentless passage of time, inviting us to ponder the lives that once revolved around it. The mirror's narrative continues as we explore its symbolic resonance across generations. Mirrors in many cultures were believed to possess protective qualities, able to ward off evil spirits or capture negative energies. In the case of Queen Tiye, the bronze mirror may have functioned as both a protective talisman and a sacred object, reinforcing her role as an intermediary between the divine and the mortal. Its surface, polished to near perfection, held more than her reflection. It captured her essence, her intentions, and perhaps even fragments of her soul. The mirror becomes a nexus of artistry, spirituality, and personal history, a convergence of human ingenuity and divine inspiration that continues to captivate and mystify. Even today, the mirror of Queen Tiye challenges modern assumptions about the past. It is a reminder that objects are not inert. They carry the imprints of those who used them, the cultural values of their time, and the spiritual beliefs that guided daily life. By studying the mirror, we gain insight into a civilization that valued artistry, ritual, and continuity, and into a queen who understood her place within that complex web of power. The bronze mirror stands as a testament to endurance, both of material and memory, capturing the intimate and the monumental, the mundane and the divine. In contemplating the mirror that saw eternity, we also confront the fragility and resilience of human achievement. Pharaohs rise and fall, dynasties crumble, and cities are lost to sand and time. Yet artifacts like this mirror endure, carrying forward the essence of lives lived thousands of years ago. Queen Tiye's reflection, once alive in polished bronze, now resonates across centuries, offering a connection to a world both distant and immediate, a reminder of the continuity of human experience and the enduring power of objects to tell stories that transcend generations. The bronze mirror ultimately embodies the eternal interplay between life, death, and memory. It allows us to envision the presence of a queen whose influence shaped an empire, whose daily rituals were infused with both practicality and devotion, and whose legacy continues to inspire awe. By gazing into this object, we are not merely looking at polished metal, we are glimpsing the human desire to be seen, remembered, and connected to something greater than oneself. The mirror that saw eternity does not merely reflect, it immortalizes, preserving a moment of history, a fragment of divinity, and the enduring spirit of Queen Tiye. As our exploration concludes, the mirror remains a silent witness. It does not speak, yet it communicates volumes. It reflects not only the face of a queen, but the essence of an era defined by artistry, spirituality, and power. Through its smooth bronze surface, we see the continuity of human aspiration, the intersection of personal and cosmic order, and the quiet majesty of a woman who understood the significance of her reflection in shaping the history of Egypt. The mirror that saw eternity, in its silent, enduring presence, invites us to reflect upon the past, consider the present, and imagine the endless possibilities of memory, identity, and human achievement, stretching into the future. Thank you for joining us on this journey through Egypt's timeless mysteries. Each artifact holds secrets that continue to captivate and inspire. We hope you enjoyed uncovering their stories with us tonight. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below.